Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our family talk today. As I mentioned last week, it's going to be a shorter pared back talk, in fact, service today. And I'm doing the talk, and Ben is going to do the reading for us today. But welcome to all our children, and I hope you're with us for this short talk, for it's very much for you. And we're going to start off. I'm going to show you something, and I want you maybe to tell your mum and dad, or your mum or dad, or both of them, what you think, what story you think this is about in the Bible. It's a parable that Jesus told. I'm going to show you now something. Hopefully you can see those. Can you see those? And I want you to think what story it's about in the Bible, a story that Jesus told, a parable. Okay. Well, when you're thinking about that, Ben's going to give you another clue, and he's going to do the reading today from John's Gospel, chapter 15.
The reading is from John chapter 15, starting at verse 1. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, and you are the branches. If a man remains in me, and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not remain in me, he is like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown in the fire and burned. If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be given you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ben, for doing that for us today. So, grapes. Did you get which story it was in the Bible that Jesus told? Of course, the one that Ben's just read us. It's about the gardener and the vine and the grapes. I wonder what the most important words are in that reading today. I wonder what they might be. Maybe you want to discuss it or talk about it with your parents. I think for me, probably the most important words are remain in me, and I will remain in you. Well, before we talk a little bit more about this story, I'm going to ask you some questions. When I asked Ben what this was a clue towards, he said he thought it was Jesus turning the water into wine. It could have been about Jesus turning the water into wine, but it wasn't. It was about the gardener and about Jesus and about the vine and about us being in the vine. So I've got an image here, and I want to show you this image. I wonder if you can see it. This is an image of a place where grapes grow. I wonder if you know what it's called. Do you know what it's called? I wonder if you know the name. Can you tell your parents now what you think this is? Yes, it's a vineyard, isn't it? It's a vineyard. It's where they grow grapes. And if you have a look at it, maybe some of you have been on holiday where things like this grow. I wonder what countries grapes grow in. Would you know what countries they mainly grow in? Would you have any idea? Maybe you could talk to your parents about that. Well, I think there's a clue in the picture, isn't there? Because look at the lovely blue sky. We don't get many of those blue skies in Ballymoney and on the Causeway, do we? So they probably don't grow here. But the main countries that they grow in, particularly in Europe, would be Spain and Italy and France. And if you've travelled very far away, they grow in Australia as well. But a country that they grow into, a country where Jesus lived, they grew in Israel. Lots and lots of lovely grapes in Israel. You see how they grow in lines and how all the grapes grow out from each other. I wonder if you know what colour grapes can be. Well, I showed you some grapes and they're the colour purple, but I wonder what other colours they might be as well. Could you maybe talk to your parents about that? What other colours might they be? Well, there's red grapes and there's white grapes and there's black grapes as well. And here's another question for you. Now, this is a hard question, so you may not get this unless you Google it. But what do we call the study of grapes? Here's a clue, okay? Or what it might be. Grapeology. Is it grapeology? Is it vine culture? Or is it viticulture? Is it grapeology? Is it vine culture? Or is it viticulture? I wonder which one you think it is. I wonder if your parents know. Well, it's viticulture. It's viticulture. Here's one final question for you. What are dried grapes called? I think probably many of you when you were younger would have had these in little boxes put into your lunchbox when you went to school. What are they called? Sultanas, isn't that right? And raisins. I didn't know that for years. I think even until I had my kids. We didn't have them when I was a wee nipper. So that's right, it's raisins and sultanas. Well, I'm going to show you another picture here. This one's going to be a bit harder to see, this one. Can you see that one, Ben, on the camera? Just about. If you can see that picture, that's a picture of a vine. Look at it. It's got long roots. It's got a big trunk here. And you see how the vine branches grow out like this. And then those who grow grapes would have grown those along wires. And then at the end of the wires, eventually you get lovely grapes like these. Or like these lovely juicy grapes growing in a long line. And you know, I can just imagine that Jesus was perhaps strolling through a vineyard in his own land, and maybe he was picking a few of the grapes, and maybe some of his disciples were picking some of the grapes as well and eating them. And he thought it would be a really good illustration or a really good example of how we show what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ. And he said this, he said that he is the vine, that we are the branches, and that God, his Father in heaven, is the gardener. And he said that if you remain in him, if you're part of the vine, then we will bear much fruit. Isn't that so important? But he also said that if you don't remain part of the vine, then you wither. Imagine what would happen if you cut one of the branches off the main vine. What would happen? Well, eventually it would just wither and die, and it couldn't produce any fruit. And Jesus was saying, the closer we are to him, the closer we are to the vine, the more like branches we are, the more fruit we can bear. And that's a really important thing to remember. Remain in Jesus, remain in him, and he will remain in us. But there's one other really important question to ask you as well. What does it mean by bearing fruit? What is fruit? Is it oranges and apples? Well, no, it's not. In the Bible, in a book called Galatians, in Galatians chapter 5, verse 22, it tells us what fruit is. You might want to look that up. It's Galatians chapter 5, verse 22. And it says fruit for somebody who's a follower of Jesus is love and joy and peace and patience and gentleness and self-control. Those are what fruit is. That's what what becomes of us when we are followers of Jesus Christ. We can show more love, we can be more peaceful, we can be more gentle, we can be more loving. That's what Jesus was saying fruit is. If you remain in me, if you stay close to Jesus, that's the sort of fruit you will be. Well, this morning when I was thinking about this talk, I was in the kitchen, and just sitting on the kitchen was this: live a life of love. Can you see that, Ben? Live a life of love. And when I looked at that, I realized that my son Joe had done this in Sunday school, probably when he was 4 or 5 or 6. I think he could write about then. Could he, Ben? Could he write about then? Maybe, we're not sure. But anyway, he had said, live a life of love. And then it says here, the fruit that we bear is love. And from that reading, it says the fruit is patience and love and kindness and peace and faithfulness and gentleness and self-control. That's what it says on this. And that's what Jesus was saying to us. If we remain in him, if we are part of the vine, we can bear much fruit. And the fruit that we are to bear is all about love, living a life of love. So one final thing to say about the reading. It also says about pruning the branches. I'm sure you've seen your mum and dad pruning trees. What happens when you prune trees? Well, a bit of the branch breaks off, it's broken off, but then maybe 6 months later, it's produced more fruit, or there's more flowers on it. And Jesus was saying the way to be pruned is to read his word, to read the Bible. And that's a really important way of bearing fruit as well. We need to read the Bible. So I hope you've enjoyed the story today. I think what you could do, if we think of what grape makes, I think maybe you could ask your mum and dad to go out and buy a cheap bottle of Schlur for you to enjoy, because I think there's probably some grapes in this somewhere. So maybe your parents could buy that for you today as a wee treat. And remember, let's learn to bear much fruit, to live a life of love by staying close to Jesus. Let's say a wee prayer. Dear God, we thank you for lovely, juicy grapes. Please help us to grow the fruits of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control within us. Amen. Well, we're really hoping to see you back in church over the coming weeks and months. And during the summer, we're going to do something really exciting for you. We're going to have a big party in the new walled garden, or the quiet garden. And we're going to invite you all to that sometime during the summer before everything starts back for you in September. So God bless you all. Bye.